It is 6 o'clock and it looks like we have everybody here, so I can call this meeting to order. Today is March 8th, 2021, 6 p.m. Today we'll be conducting a school board meeting of the Amherst School Board. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chairperson of the Amherst School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-4 and its extensions, this body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously to this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and/or listen to the meeting on Zoom and via phone by following the directions and links provided on our website, www.sau39.org. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email A Wallace, that's AWALLACE at sau39.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where you are and if anyone else is in the room with you during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So let's get started. Tom?
Tom Gothier alone in his home office.
Okay. Ellen?
Virgin home alone.
Terry?
Terry Beam, alone in my home office, although I just kicked my dog out who tried to steal my dinner.
I don't think dogs count under right to know law.
Sound like Sharon.
Conklin home alone.
Okay, Kuzma, I am home and alone. All right, so let's get this meeting started. We will start with the first public comment of the evening. If anybody from the public wishes to speak, please use the raise your hand feature in there. Yeah, so please use your raise your hand feature and I will call on you and you will be allowed to speak. So, Mr. Ballard, you may unmute yourself.
Good evening. Larry Ballard, 11 Pinewood Drive. I'm also the president of the Amherst Education Association. I have two concerns on the calendar changes I wanted to share that were discussed at the last SAU board meeting. First, a great deal of the messaging makes it seem like this is a done deal. So before things get too far down the road, I would want to point out that to get from the old 180-day school year to the present hours-based school year required a little bit more than impact bargaining as described, required changes to multiple sections of the agreement before the current calendar could be implemented. The board presently does have the option of two different calendars, but the model discussed last month is not one that currently exists in writing. And secondly, the district has somewhere around 200 employees, but teachers and support staff, and I think students have yet to be surveyed, especially about some of the recent changes that have come up in the past few weeks. So I would really strongly suggest and ask that the board engage in gathering some feedback from stakeholders before taking action on the proposal at hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Erin Tower. You may unmute yourself.
Hi, Erin Tower, 29 Border Street in Amherst. I would just like to ask the board to consider the start time change going into effect for the 2022-23 school year instead of 21-22, so that time can be taken to solve the minor details of the school busing issue for the elementary school students, as well as putting in place before school programs for 5th and 6th grade at the middle school and additional after school programs for the children at the elementary school level. I completely agree with all of the science and the need to change the school start times. I just feel that more parents would feel more comfortable with this change if all of these details had been completely ironed out and presented to the public before the start of the school year. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anybody else from the public that would wish to speak, please use the raise your hand feature. Okay. Seeing none, let's move on to the subcommittee reports. We have Amy Facey and Shannon Gascoigne from the JFAC committee here tonight to help us with the subcommittee reports. All board members also are ready to go with committee updates along with Shannon and Amy. And then this is kind of a phase-in process of having the board be more responsible or more in tune with what's going on and passing the information back and forth to each other. But Amy and Shannon are going to be helping us out a bit more tonight than they will be in the future. So first up, we have PR, which is going to be Shannon and Tom. So go ahead and unmute yourselves and go. What have you guys been up to?
Sure. Hi, thanks. So we're now meeting weekly, and Tom, feel free to jump in if I miss anything. But our most recent meeting focused on our newly adjusted calendar. So the minutes have been posted and shared. Hopefully anyone interested here on the board has had a chance to look over those. Our timeline right now includes April to June really being that time to educate the community regarding the need and the work that has been accomplished to date. So we're hoping to accomplish that with direct mail flyers driving residents directly to our website, our YouTube channel, and social media and email. So in April, we're planning to launch a series of office hour videos on our YouTube channel where we'll answer questions in a conversational manner regarding a variety of topics. Residents can submit questions using the Q&A feature that's already on the website. And hopefully we'll be able to utilize that to answer some of those questions. And we're targeted July 4th as the launch date for pushing out the plan with refined cost and designs once the work of the cost analysis subcommittee has wrapped up. So that's kind of the date we're targeting now. And then what else? Our objective really just remains to educate, inform, and engage the community, and then continue to inform the community. We really, as a subcommittee, we spend a lot of time talking about how more than anything, we really just want to bring the community along with us throughout this whole process to really understand all the work that's been done and make sure we have an opportunity to answer as many questions as possible and bring those questions forward if we don't have an answer to any of those. But we also spent a little bit of time this last week discussing the importance of measuring and monitoring our efforts. So some ideas that we have, we had done one survey last summer, so we know there will be a need for another survey. And then also maybe doing small surveys along the way. So if we go out and meet with small stakeholder groups, then immediately, sending a small survey to that stakeholder group. Okay, you've heard, this part of the plan or this part of the need. What are your thoughts? So just talked about ways to continue engaging. Tom, did I miss anything, Alan?
No, I would say I was going to touch upon the survey, and you mentioned bringing people along with this, but I think it's also engaging them to really get the questions and hit on the topics of the things that they want to know about this project. So whether it's a Lions Club, for example, or a garden club, or if it's one of the political groups in towns, or if it's just young parents, getting all the different angles as to why people have a vested interest in this, or why they may not have an interest in it, what their concerns are, but really trying to solicit that as much as possible and finding the different ways to do that. So it's not just us presenting information, which we're all very good at being able to do, but also finding out what information people need to be able to make an informed decision a year from now.
Absolutely. Yeah, we really, as a subcommittee, we really talked about, just any group that wants to hear from us and engage with us and talk with us. We're just so excited to talk about the project and the direction that the board is given for a 2022 plan to put something on the ballot. And we want to make sure that as many residents as possible have an opportunity to ask their questions and to be as informed as possible when they go next March.
Thank you. Shannon, so you mentioned that the kind of like a calendar minutes and things like that are up.
Yep.
Can you explicitly state where those are, not only for us, but for the community?
Sure. Yeah. So they're on the Slack channel for the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee.
Perfect. Thank you.
And the calendar is really, that's a working document for the PR subcommittee. Anybody's welcome to look at it. But basically that kind of goes through all our strategies and tactics and who on the committee is owning that. And we're still filling all of those in. Great.
Thank you so much. Okay. Does anybody else have any quick questions for Shannon or Tom? I didn't see any. Okay, so next up we have the construction costs, which is Amy and Terry.
Great. So yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to join the meeting tonight. So just quickly before I get to the cost committee, I just wanted also folks to know that in addition to these subcommittee meetings, we've set up bi-weekly meetings with Beth, Adam, Roger, Shannon, and myself to keep the communication open between the board, JFAC, and the SAU. And our first task is to develop the RFQ for the architect. So maybe after these committee updates, we can ask Roger if he has an update on that process.
Perfect.
So for cost committee, where we stand right now, Roger's doing some initial review work with building and SAU leadership. Really looking to solidify the priorities within the scope of work. And following that, we will be having building specific meetings, one for Clark Wilkins, one for AMS, to continue that work to further review and refine the scope, looking at really prioritizing the overall building needs, classroom numbers, kitchen size, serving area equipment, IT requirements, and any other items that we want to take a look at. During that meeting, we'll look to separate the building into areas so that we can review each space. We are keeping a spreadsheet where we're tracking these potential scope and cost changes so that we can have transparency into any of the adjustments that are made. Roger, did you want to add anything to that? And also Terry? I know Terry spent a lot of time in the last meeting really digging in, which was really helpful.
I just wanted to say thank everyone that joined us on the 24th. It was just a very good meeting and a good collaborative effort from LaValle and Brenzinger to Harvey to ourselves. So just thanks everyone for taking the time.
Thank you, Roger. Terry?
I would just add that I think that so much great work has already been done and it's so appreciated. And I think at this point, we're really just sharpening our pencils and saying, okay, here's something we really like, but can we, do we like it enough that we can afford it? Or is it essential to what we're trying to do? Or can we maybe do like a bank of windows there, but concrete there? We're really getting to very nitty gritty details of materials used and return on investment and asking some tough questions. And I think that it was nice to come in as obviously familiar, but a little bit of fresh eyes for not being at JFAC in a little bit because I'm not one of our reps. And so I'm excited to be back in the mix and really geeking out with the details. It's been, and it is very collaborative because I think that it could very quickly devolve and everybody just really is looking at the end result and saying, hey, we want to get the things that we want to have so that we're not immediately, like when Wilkins was built, it was immediately too small. We don't want to have that problem, but we don't want to go so big that we can't sustain it. So we really are trying to find that right balance. And so it's exciting work.
Thank you. Moving on, does anybody have any questions about the construction costs? Real quick for that committee work. Okay. Moving on next to finance, that is Amy and Josh.
Yeah, so not a lot of information, but Michelle has been really helpful with her connections at the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank. So she is working to set up a meeting with those folks and the USDA Rural Development to discuss a possible new financing option, which if, you know, we certainly want to take a look and take advantage of all opportunities that that could help us finance this in the most cost-effective way. So there's a new program with USDA Rural Development in conjunction with New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank that could potentially offer us these favorable rates. So I really appreciate Michelle working to get that set up. So I know we're looking at later in the month having a meeting. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like you guys haven't really jumped off too much in like the reboot, I guess let's call it.
Yeah, we think. Yeah, we think this is probably a good place to start to take a look at that and then follow. You know, you want to make sure that you are understanding the different financing options that are out there for us, and then once we nail that down, then we can start to really dive into the specifics.
Perfect. I think that's great. Okay, so moving on, we actually, since our last board meeting, we did start a new subcommittee within JFAC, and that's specifically for the Clark School. Shannon and Josh, would you mind taking a moment to explain why this was created and what's been going on?
Sure. Yeah. So we on JFAC, we've talked for a while that Clark was something that we needed to dig into. So now is the time. So we've tasked the Clark School Subcommittee with exploring all possible options for the use of the Clark School building should a new school building be approved in March 2022. We've asked the committee to bring back information and recommendations for consideration as part of a long-term facility strategy. We haven't given the committee any parameters regarding what those recommendations should look like. We've had to do the work and outreach necessary to provide informed options. They will explore possible ways the town or schools could use the site, the potential sale of the site, or demolition of the building, etc. So the committee has formed, and Josh is the board rep on that. So Josh, please jump in at any time. Victoria Parisi is the chair of that committee. They've met, they've established a timeline and a plan. Their approach is to engage local elected and appointed officials, followed by community stakeholder groups, and followed by all interested community members. Again, bringing everyone along and to the table for the conversation. The first group is scheduled to meet, I believe, next week. Is that right, Josh? Yep. And includes SAU employees, selectmen, the town administrator, members of the town master plan steering committee, and various other commissions, to name a few. There will be more to report at the next meeting. And I think the target date for a formal committee presentation would probably be sometime early summer. And I'm sure I've left something else. So Josh, please jump in.
No, as usual, I think you pretty much hit all the points, Shannon. But I think one thing, given that this is a new committee, you know, confirming just a quick straw poll kind of confirmation from the board, I think the committee wanted to make sure that there wasn't a clear directive, like go find this one option, that right now we should be in information gathering and finding various options. So just confirming with the board that that's where we are right now. And there's not a clear, like, go figure out how much it could sell for. And that's the only path we should exploring. But right now that we should be exploring all potential paths forward for Clark.
Okay, so for the quick straw poll, thumbs up, thumbs down, if you think that it should be more open-ended at the moment. So thumbs up if you think so, thumbs down if not. Okay, that's what I thought.
Thank you.
Because that makes absolute sense. Thanks, Josh.
Yep.
All right, any other questions real quick for Josh or Shannon about Clark? Okay. Roger, so before we move on to other subcommittee work outside of JFAC, can you give us a quick update about what's going on with the RFPs?
So the RFP for the architect, I have the draft version of that, and Adam and I are actually meeting this week to just finalize it and go through that and then send it out to legal for the final review, and then we'll be on the street with that. And then we're going right behind that with our site and civil is to follow. We should have, I had it up in front of me, we should have the architect's plan is to be out by the 19th, and then site and civil is actually planned to follow a week later. So that's how we're looking for that, but we're concentrating on the architects first. Should have that finalized tomorrow and hopefully sent out by the 19th.
And the date for returns, roughly?
I think if you give me just 1 second, it is.
And
we wanted it to come back, RFP results for April 19th, and then we gave ourselves a week to review and interview, to review the RFP, and then we gave ourselves 2 weeks to interview the candidates, and then we make a decision by May 10th. And
Perfect.
that's just a proposed timeline for right now, but we wanted something to hold ourselves accountable.
okay, thank you. So just, and Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, or if actually, Roger, if you want to state why we decided to move forward with this today rather than next year, you know, just so that everybody's aware, that might be great.
We really just wanted to take this project seriously at this point and have all of our ducks in a row, and then come time for this to go to vote and be approved, we really just wanted to move forward and not have to go through this process at that time.
Perfect. So just figured I'd get that on the record. All right. Any questions about the RFP process for Roger? Where we're headed with this? Okay, seeing nobody's hand raised. Are there any other subcommittees outside of JFAC that we have to report back on at the moment? And feel free for anybody that does, you know, have a subcommittee that might need to be put on the list so that we don't forget, please let me know, send a message, and I'll make sure I add it just so that we don't forget about any. So, but I think right now JFAC is really what we're in on. So, okay, seeing nobody mentioning any other subcommittees. Amy and Shannon, you guys are all set for the night. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. No, we really appreciate being able to participate and you know, keep our two groups working together as we move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to also say, I think your letter to the editor, and I mentioned this to Tom in our meeting, was great. Everything you highlighted in regards to the building, that really helps us all kind of work together, and it's going to be a great partnership. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much, you know, for showing up tonight and helping out, you know, with the updates and things like that. And, you know, if you guys want to still keep coming and helping with the updates, that's great. But at the same time, I also, you know, we've talked about, you know, needing for transition too and stuff like that. I'm sure you don't want to show up to 1 million meetings a month.
There's a lot of them, that's for sure.
We'll get there. All right, so moving on, we have fitting communication. We I think it was even, you know, roughly this time last year, we discussed the need for a communication committee. You know, as part of our board goals, the last couple of years have been focused on communication with the community and how to move forward and do it in the most effective way. We've definitely made progress. I think this year we didn't make as much progress as we had wanted to with some of the items on our goals. You know, COVID, of course, you know, got in the way. We all had other things that we were dealing with, but we continued with our letters to the editor and things like that. So Josh has been working on a presentation. He hit it quickly last month for the communication committee. And then this month, we've all had the opportunity to review that presentation. And now we can actually start addressing it. So we're going to spend some time tonight going over and fine tuning some of these points. So Josh, take it away. And Adam, Josh will need to share his screen, I believe.
Yep, if possible, I will click the button. We'll see if this works. All right. Are people seeing my screen at the moment?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so since I've been on the board, I think it was about October when I brought up this idea for a communication committee. And then the tidal wave of the budget season and the holidays and everything else hit, and sort of fell under the radar a little bit. And we were dealing with a lot of other pertinent things, but I wanted to take a few minutes to just go through some of the things that were in my head and really have a discussion about them. And to be clear, this is really a discussion. This is not Josh coming in with some decrees about what he thinks is best. I think we all probably have some good ideas here. And so I'm hoping to sort of flesh them out and develop them a little bit. So some of the things we're already doing well. We're writing monthly letters to the editor. We're having monthly public meetings with public input. We have our emails and our personal interactions with the community, which of course right now are happening less often than any of us would wish. So why are we sitting through this slideshow? I think one of the things is we sort of in October talked about, yeah, let's have a communication committee and let's put 2 people on it. And again, then sort of things happened and it hasn't really gone the way that I envisioned, in part because I think we just sort of got overwhelmed. So looking ahead though, how could we potentially use this to better communicate with the public? So the first question to talk about is whether or not this should be something we assign 2 people to every year, whether it's just when we need it, or how this functions moving forward. So I want to begin by opening up discussion about whether or not we want to officially assign people, or if we want to just sort of make this a little looser than other committees.
All right. So because Josh is sharing his screen, I'll be keeping an eye on people raising their hands and letting him know. But what's everybody's thought? Is this should be a, one of our, committees that we assign people to every year? Terry, you went up first. Go ahead.
I think it certainly wouldn't hurt to feel a sense of ownership. And because we do have monthly tasks, I think that having it just be a standing committee makes total sense.
Okay. Ellen?
Appropriately enough, last Friday, I stood outside in the freezing cold for 45 minutes talking to a fellow resident of Amherst who's a little older and struggled with the idea of where to find the communication. And so this discussion is so timely. So I would say absolutely. I think a committee that's just focused on this, because it's a big job, and I think if you spread it too thinly amongst all the members, it gets lost. I think it's a great idea. I will chime in. This person had a great idea for the communication committee, or just a good idea, which was a quarterly newsletter that gets mailed to all residents. We talked about how the Amherst Citizen has, since it's gone digital, it's sort of less accessible to your hands and your mail. It used to be where you'd find all your information, and now there's a bunch of links. So I thought that was a great idea. So I'll bring it forward to the communication committee, if there is going to be a communication committee, and share that. I think that's a great way to be connected. And I wonder if we could get some Sohegan High School students involved in putting that together.
So Josh, if you want to throw that into the platforms.
Yeah.
Coming later.
Yeah. So I'm taking notes, and at the end of all of this, prior to our next meeting, I'll send out like an overview of what we all talked about, and we can, then sort of figure it out from there. But yes, I will add that to the potential platform ideas that pop up later.
Perfect. All right. So Tom, I haven't heard from you. Do you think,
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think having 2 people dedicated to it is going to reduce the confusion when it comes each month to who wants to write it, who has an idea. I think that this committee will, focusing first off on the main thing that we do with our monthly letters to the editor, It'll give that some coordination, and we can uniformly seek input every month. And then I think that anything else we can add on to that is a good thing, but having 5 people try to discuss it at a meeting is a little cumbersome at times. I think if we can fine tune ideas in this committee and then bring them forward and then debate it, it'll be less throwing darts against the wall and much more refined to say, this would work, this wouldn't work. This is how we would afford to pay for something. This is, something we can't do because of cost or whatever the situation might be. So I think it's a good idea to have 2 people dedicated to it that can then bring it forward to the rest of us.
All right. I actually agree. I think it should just be an official committee that's on the list that we review right after elections every year. So.
Okay,
Right.
That sounds great. And I think we talked about Tom and I being on it now. And obviously normally we'd be already talking about potential committee changes next month, but this year will be a little different. So we can address that in July. We can assign it then. All right, so then it comes to, should we refine any of the ways we currently communicate? And we've already started to touch on some of those. First one being letter to the editor, and whether or not this group should handle them or we continue to sort of pass it around. How we edit them as a group is a question that I have. And should we be posting them, like Ellen said, now that the Citizen is only digital, are there other means by which we want to distribute the monthly letter to the editor? So again, thoughts on this question from the board.
Terry.
So I think that if this committee is going to exist, which it sounds like it will, it absolutely makes sense for between 2 members. It may be that you guys take turns. Maybe you discuss it together and one likes to write, the other likes to edit. I mean, however you want to do it. It would make sense for it to start with the committee. I do think that there's value in getting input from the rest of the board to some degree, that you're not, how do I say it? Like, I know that I've had to go through the editing process and it can be a little bit tricky, but it ended better than it started. Like, the input really mattered. And I said, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that, or, oh, that is kind of awkward. So I would still like to see them before they're a done deal. However you choose to allow that input is up to you. I would respect whatever the committee decides for how they want that just to logistically function. But I do think that it's important for us to see it before it's final. And posting them elsewhere, absolutely, because I, along with everyone, I love the Citizen, and I miss having it sitting on the counter to remind me to look at it. And for some of our citizens, they're just not very comfortable digitally. So I think we need to find both a couple digital ways to share, which is pretty easy. And I like the idea of Nixle and website and all of that. But then we also need to find a non-digital way. And so maybe that's quarterly, maybe it's mailing. I think there are different ideas we can put on the table, but we do need to go beyond social media and even just digital to make sure we're talking to all of our citizens.
Tom.
I would suggest that this be the clearinghouse for all ideas, that every month at X date, this committee seeks input from the other 3 board members, then gets together and crafts the letter however they want to write it, the 2 of them. If it's one person writing it every month, or they each write a section of it and then present that to the rest of the board. And then I think from there, that should instigate all of the other communication, whether it's through Facebook, if it's the board page on the SAU website, if it's through Nixle, wherever it is. But I think that should be the basis and the catalyst that sparks all of the other outreach that we do. Because again, primarily that's the bulk of our outreach. And I think it's also should be on this committee to find out what we can and can't do via social media, what we have access to via websites, whether it's our own or whether it's on the SAU page. But this committee should go forward and investigate the options that we have and what we can create so that we can have better places to access the information.
Okay.
All right.
Anybody else? Are we good?
That's it. That has their
All right.
hand up.
All right. So then one that we've already touched on and started to change sort of naturally and organically as a board in the last month and a half is the emails to the general ASB account. We've changed that procedure. So really, I left things as is just to point out that we've already made changes, but I guess a quick discussion of, is this working and should we leave it alone for the next year? Or is there a different way that we want to handle these general emails? And then I also added a question, one thing that surprised me a while ago when before I was a board member and I sent an email to this email address, was when Adam responded. And it's not a problem. I don't want to keep Adam in the dark, and I'm certainly generally okay with him being attached, but wondering if, this might be a small way to lower the amount of responses that he has to give in a given month. He can still, under this new system, can still read them and to see what the public is saying, but doesn't have to feel like he needs to respond. And again, I'm happy to hear Adam's thoughts on this particular question and if there's a reason he likes being on them or not. Generally, just if we feel like this new procedure is working and if anything needs to change about it.
Adam, do you want to chime in on this?
Sure, happy to. I think it's helpful for me to be on that list because board members are not full-time employees, and if there's something urgent, it's helpful for me to know about it. I don't feel compelled to respond to those emails because most people are trying to receive board contact, but I do find it helpful just to be informed about those communications. So I'm happy to further reduce my compulsion to respond.
Okay.
Okay. Tom.
And I think generally, and this is no offense to Adam, this is to whoever the superintendent would be. I don't think that it's always appropriate for the superintendent to respond because the superintendent is not the board. So when somebody's emailing us as a board, unless they say, I have a question for Adam or I have a question for the superintendent, we can seek input, we can let them know what's going on, but the response has to come from us unless it's something that we specifically don't have the knowledge of, the ability to answer, or if it's a question specifically for him. And in that regard, I would say we're probably better off advising them to email Adam directly on that. His email is publicly available. So I think that there are some places where we need to do the responding and keep him in the loop. And then I think there are other places where he needs to respond because it's a direct question about policy, or it's a direct question involving a school district issue that is out of the board's purview. So I think we'd be better off to keep those, let him know what's going on for the discussion, but we control the response because it's the board that's being asked those questions, unless there's some legal compliance or those unique circumstances which I can't define right now, but we all know it when we see it.
I think that Adam has rarely responded lately.
I'm not accusing him
including us.
No, I'm not accusing him of doing that by any means. I just want to stress that this is a board email account. It's not, we don't have access to Adam's personal email. So I think it's just it's a clarification thing more than anything.
Yeah. Terry.
So I would say, for one, I like the change that we have made where we all see the response, even though it's one person who gives the response and that's designated. And now it would obviously be designated to this committee, it sounds like. But I like at least being able to see it for one, so I don't sit up at night and go, oh man, did that fall through the cracks? Did anybody ever answer them? Because I do worry about stuff like that. And two, I just really feel like for consistency in messaging and making sure that we're all on the same page, it's really helpful to see what our message as a board, because, once we decide things, we stand behind them as a board. So I appreciate being able to see those communications. So I like that change. And I think that the public record portion, I know that I attended something, oh gosh, maybe 9 months ago that was about how you handle social media as a school board. And it was interesting, but then they've spammed me constantly since. So I haven't actually followed up much with getting more information because it's just irritated me. But I can go back to trying to hand off maybe a contact from that for whoever. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be Tom and Josh to start off with, to let you guys maybe look at their website and get some information, because they did have some good information of kind of some of the legalities of what need to happen with social media.
Tom and I went to a training. I think it was Tom. I'm pretty sure it was at least Tom and I went to a training about, public communication and electronic things earlier in the year. So it was
Okay.
good. Yeah. All right, Tom, you have.
So I didn't bring up my point that I wanted to bring up. I was just answering to Josh's comment. So I apologize for coming back on before Ellen. The one point I did want to bring up is I like the system that we have in place, but I think the system in general is inadequate. I think when we get questions to the board, I think acknowledging that question is one thing, but I think answering that question is another part of this. And I don't know the best way to do this to avoid getting into running dialogue and really going down a rabbit hole with somebody. But I do think that as a board, we are publicly accountable. And if somebody has questions for us, we don't answer them during public comment here. But we have to have a way to be able to answer those. And whether that's we tell them to bring it up for the next meeting, we'll discuss it at that meeting. If it's a more detailed email response outlining a board's decision on something, for general opinion comments that people send in, I think it's fine with a canned response, acknowledging it and putting it in the meetings. But I do think we need to have a better way of answering questions when people have them, because we don't meet frequently and we don't have a lot of opportunities to engage people directly in a smart manner and in a timely manner without making ourselves available 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I think that that's another focus for this committee, is to find the best way to do that that's smart but also respectful of people that do have questions that they send in.
Okay. Ellen.
Tom just stole my question. So I agree, or my comment. I agree that I think I know there's probably some rule around it, but it seems as though a response that "thank you so much, your question will be entered into the public comments" does not answer a question. Most are just sort of heartfelt communication, and maybe there's not questions behind them. But I do, with the change in putting the questions in the public comments, I think we should communicate that to people in some way, whether we have it in our signature from that email, just to let people know, please understand that this will be entered into public comments in our next, agenda. If you do not want that to happen, please let us know, because some people may not be comfortable with that and they don't really find out until your reply. So some way to make that public, I think, is a good idea.
I think part of it is once it's been sent to the entire board, it's kind of open, right? Like Adam, I don't know exactly the laws and rules around it, but once it's already been sent to the SAU or, to the ASB website or email address, doesn't it kind of, because it goes to all of us, doesn't it open it for entering into the minutes anyway?
He's on a phone call.
Okay.
Yes, he said it does.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah.
But I don't think it hurts, to Ellen's point, to let people know. And I think, Beth, when you've been responding, there has been that tag that this will be entered into public record at the next meeting. If does anybody have anything else on this particular topic? Like, Ellen, did you finish your thought there, or did you have anything else?
I pretty much finished my thought, but just in reply back, I think just because it comes to the 6 or 5 members, people may not want their question entered into a public document. And so I think that it's appropriate to inform people or give them the option to not have it entered.
I think the point is if they don't necessarily, if they share it with all of us, it needs to be. So it's not like I don't think there's a way to send it to the email address and have it wait until they answer yes or no and then come to us. Once it's already hit ours, we don't have the ability to pull back our knowledge on it.
Okay, thank you.
Adam, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a phone call about vaccinations, so I took the phone call.
Oh, good.
Of course, it was during time when I got asked a question. So once someone emails the entire board, it is a public record. So there's no unringing that bell. However, if there's obvious exceptions. If they're referring to something that's a student matter and there's FERPA protected material in there, if it's private in some way, if it's personnel related, there are obvious exceptions to that. My suggestion would be any place where we advertise this email address on our website to contact the board, there could be just a note there that says, with rare exceptions, most emails sent to the board become a public record.
Perfect.
And that's probably the easiest way to handle it.
I think that's great, Adam. Thank you. All right, Josh,
Yep.
can we
move on? I'm just
move
making
on?
a note of that. Yep. So this came up, I think, public input, and this is some of what Tom was touching on, and Ellen as well, is how do we respond to this public input? And we have sort of a general way with emails, but it also obviously happens at meetings. So I have some ideas there, and one of those, we already have a policy or procedure around sending us questions in advance so we can respond to them. But I think there might be better ways or more ways to clarify this, to let the public know, if you want an actual response, if you just want to send us your opinion, that's one thing. If you want an actual response, here's the best way to make that happen. And again, how we engage the community to make sure that they feel heard and that we're actually responsive, I think is important. Sometimes nothing is going to change, but sometimes we can at least be clear that we are hearing it and having the discussions, potentially by bringing it up at meetings, or maybe there's other ways. So again, how we respond to public input in the various ways in which we are taking it and how to move forward on that. So thoughts?
Tom.
So my thought here is to not derail this conversation, but I'm wondering if it's a more efficient use of our time for us to decide on who these two committee members will be from now until July, and then to have us reach out and gather everybody's communication ideas all at one time. And then from there, the two people on that committee will come back with a report in April to present to the board to say, this is what we gathered from everybody's comment. We think this is the best way to go. And then make that policy from there. I think while this is helpful, I think that it may be easier for us to gather everything offline, bring it back to the next meeting so that we have a more focused presentation from that committee to see what the best policy is.
So I can respond. I am fine with that path forward. We're almost done with this discussion, but I'm fine if we want to go offline for some of this. But we basically have 2 more slides. So we could take this question if we feel like this particular question is going to require lengthy discussion. Then yeah, I think we could submit. Now
well,
that
it's not just this question, Josh.
Yep.
I think it's just more like I'm going back to thinking of the other slides that we've seen, and I'm thinking of new ideas. And so I don't want to keep going back to those. I'd rather just put them all in an email, send it to that committee, whether it's you and I, or if it's 2 other people, and be able to go kind of go through and sort it out there. I just think it's a better use of time, and it's a little bit more efficient, so we can all take a week to gather our mental thoughts and cram everything down into an email, and that way it's a little more focused and we get everything in there. Because again, I've already thought of 3 other things that I wanted to bring up that I think are ideas to implement, but it's evolving as it goes through this presentation. So for me, it's more efficient to do that on my own time to craft the ideas and whittle them down to something useful.
I think that's a good point is, as we move offline and move through this presentation, and discuss a little bit more, if you think of more, send them to Josh at the moment, or whoever we end up deciding on at the end of this. I'm assuming Josh is going to fight kind of hard to continue to be a part of it, which I'm okay with, but because he's quite passionate about this. So at least send it to Josh and we'll figure it out the rest from there. But yeah, Tom, I think that's a really valid point. Terry, you have your hand raised.
I would like to at least finish the slides and have our initial discussion, because we get so few opportunities to actually talk to each other as a board because of rules. So I would like to just understanding that this is not going to be anything we're ever going to say about the topics, but just get our initial thoughts to give a jumping off point, and then absolutely follow up offline. And that's the whole reason we're forming a committee, right? Is so they can do deeper work offline together, where if there's only 2 of them, they're allowed to talk as much as they want, where we can't do that with all 5 of us. We'd have a quorum, and we, that becomes a meeting that has to be declared other ways. So I would like to just get through these slides, but then absolutely follow up and then get a report back on kind of what's happened with more time, and maybe answering some questions that we've brought up tonight.
Yeah. Okay. So Josh.
So like I said, really, we only have one more slide. So I suggest that the others are just kind of that we can send out later. We don't need those. So let's just quickly, the public input question. Now I'm all confused about where we are. The public input question, quickly, people's thoughts on that. And then the only other slide is other platforms. And I agree with Tom. It sounds like if it's he and I, from here, we can get people's thoughts further and then distill it down for here's our plan at the April meeting. So not developing a real plan, but getting people's input at the moment for these last 2 points.
Perfect. Okay.
So anybody else who has information or thoughts on public input and how we respond?
Yes.
Carrie.
I think this one is tricky because there are rules to how you conduct yourselves during meetings, and it is not meant to be a back and forth during a meeting. It can be among the board, but really with the public, it's them sharing an opinion or starting maybe a conversation, but it's very limited in its nature. And I think that if you're coming and hoping to have a robust discussion and debate, yeah, that's not very satisfying. But I think that there are other opportunities where it gives us the jumping off point to go, okay, this is on people's minds, and then it's up to us. I do think we need to do a better job of coming back and saying, we're going to put that on the agenda next time, or we're going to research it, or it's in the letter that, hey, and we've had multiple instances where things have been brought up and we absolutely follow up. So I think that maybe just a clearer keeping track and saying, we hear you, and it's not just, I put it into the void and then nothing ever happens again. So I think that I would be interested to hear from our new committee their suggestions for how we can appropriately find, and maybe it's having coffees every so often where people, once we can go be in public safely together, they can come in and speak more directly and have an actual conversation with a board member, with a rotating cast of board members. There are a lot of things we could do. But I think that changing the meetings themselves to be a back and forth discussion is counterproductive. We already have a lot of things to get through, and I don't think it's even allowed. So there's that.
Ellen.
Great, Carrie, I agree. And I also think, if I can remember back to the number of emails we've received, it's more so that people want to be heard on things we're going to be voting on. And I think that often those letters do help form our decisions. I know that they help inform my decisions. And I think Adam is a testament to that as well, especially with our school start times most recently. I would assume our community feels heard. Doesn't mean we're going to make the decision that they wrote the letter about. We're going to try to make the decision that's best for everybody. So I agree with Terry, a back and forth, as we all know, on social media, right? For a perfect example, can just go down a rabbit hole and is treacherous. If Tom is interested, I wouldn't mind partnering with Josh for these last couple of months of my existence on the Amherst School Board to help him a little bit with the communication. I will say that being a small business owner, marketing is kind of my thing. And I also, having been on PR with JFAC now, we have a lot of tremendous ideas that the board could be using. And Beth and Adam, I just have a quick question when I'm thinking about something, and I'll bring it up to Josh. If there are only 2 board members present, so for instance, if two board members were to do sort of like a frequently asked question and put the video somewhere so that there wasn't all this public input to go down a rabbit hole. Is that okay?
I guess it's kind of like the way you quickly described it, I think that's okay. Even two board members, even though they don't make a quorum, they're not allowed to sit there and be like, hey, sorry, that sounds right to me. Right, Adam?
Yeah, so a board member only has authority as a board member when they are meeting as a board. So outside of board meetings, board members have no authority except that was specifically granted to them by the board. So if a number of board members got together to answer community questions, they'd be doing so from their own opinion or from just recitation of facts of things that occurred at a board meeting. So it's permissible. It's not a violation of the right to know law. It could be still a violation of the right to know law if two board members got together and publicly debated a topic and said, this is how we're now going to vote on an issue at the board meeting, because that is technically conducting or having conversations that appear to be board business outside of the board meeting. And think how easy it would be to say, well, Christine and I are together and I'm sure Meg will vote with us too when we get together at our next board meeting. So it is possible for board members to be together and even to be answering questions from their own opinion, but it has to be very carefully construed to not be seen as conducting board business.
Yeah, and I think, if even with, whether it's coffee meetings or things like that, you are only allowed to state board facts as though they've been voted on, right? Ellen, this is just the most recent non-agreed upon vote that we had. The four of us voted to hold off on the warrant article this year, where you voted to still move forward with it. The board decision is we held it, right? So that is the decision and that is the communication that needs to be brought forward. It can be brought forward that,
Yeah, I think this has gone off track a little. I definitely wouldn't discuss anything that the board, it's more just like frequently asked questions kind of submitted by community members. Why doesn't the board, why can't the board do these kind of things? When does the board meet? When are your meetings? Where can we find it? Just kind of one more branding of all our communication that's out there, but I would never, believe me, sitting by Josh's pool, discuss any of that.
Yeah.
And I would want to, because these meetings are long enough, let's be honest.
All right. So Josh, did we?
Yeah, I think that's sufficient. And then the only other thing to talk about, and we can again give a quick thoughts on this, and then we can gather more information. Is where we communicate and other platforms. We talked about this a little bit in October, but again, I think it would be good for whoever's on this committee to have clearance from the board to say, yeah, go ahead and post our meeting and our agenda on Facebook or on Twitter or Nixle or wherever. So people's thoughts quickly on this. And then I think from here, my suggestion is that we just decide who is this committee, and then this committee can take it and run from there.
All right. Anybody have any thoughts on this particular slide on the different platforms and stuff like that? Tom, I was gonna say.
I think any and all of them that we're legally and ethically allowed to do would make sense to do, because it's really just a matter of resharing a lot of information, whether it's the letter or if it's the agenda, sharing that in multiple places. And then if it's something like Facebook where you can get into more real-time reactions and real-time posts and everything, I think it's a great thing, but it's just a matter of just making sure we're in compliance with whatever we whatever RSAs or whatnot are out there. And then in terms of who wants to be on the board, Ellen, I'm more than fine having you on there while you finish up your term. That's fine by me. You referenced it earlier. I didn't respond, but that's more than okay by me.
Tom, are you done? If you are,
Correct.
I have some thoughts on this
I'm
slide.
done.
Okay. So I have done some research on building out a website. Going into this research, I had some key points that I wanted to make sure were addressed in whatever platform we use to build out a website. One of them is making it super easy for any random person that may not even understand how to make a website to be able to go in and actually add content and edit it and things like that. The other things is I felt it needed to be free because I don't think we should be asking taxpayers to pay for this. And within that also making it so that it wasn't owned by any one person, such as Josh is the one that makes it, but Josh is not going to be on the board for the rest of his life. So it's something that needs to be easily transferable from one person to another. And I have a husband that knows this area very well, and he spent a lot of time with me one night trying to figure out the best platform that would allow us to be able to build a drag and drop website, and we found one. I checked with policy as well as Adam a little bit on what we're allowed to do, and the SAU can grant us access to a web address as long as everything that goes on the website is factual, which I think is our goal anyway. And this is a place where we can kind of use as a repository for a lot of our letters to the editor, random presentations, things like that. And then, there's a couple of, behind the scenes things that would make it so it was easily transferable. But we did find a place that's called Netlify. It's super easy drag and drop. Josh, who I think is a little intimidated, or I know for a fact is intimidated about the idea of a website, could easily do it himself. Just, copy and paste the letter to the editor in there, paste it into the right section, and it comes out all pretty for him. And we could use, rather than a, random netlify.blah.com website, we would be able to use a website such as asb.sau39.org. And it's free. So before I went and made a huge amount of, did a huge amount of work building it out, because we would need to create a new email address that would make it transferable. But I think we could also do it for, creating a Facebook account under that, transferable email address. It could be something as easy as communications, at sau39.org or something like that, so that whoever is in control of that would hand over the password and email address, and then the password would be changed, once, if next year Terry took over this committee and Josh was no longer on it, Josh would hand over the email address and password. If he moved and wasn't able to do that, it could be a simple password reset. So before we went too crazy on it, I just wanted to bring up to the board, and then we can talk about some of the other things that we might want to add to it other than just letters to the editors. We have the ability to point to other websites such as the SAU's YouTube page and things like that. There are some policies around how to do it, but I just wanted to bring that up to everybody, that's something I'm excited about, and it's an idea that I have that I'm excited about. So I kind of wanted a thumbs up, and I can go do some building. Terry?
I think you're excited for good reason. I think that sounds really useful. And it would be, it would even be really great for, say, the SAU website to jump to us, or for the SAU Facebook page. And so I think that having multiple venues to get people to the information you want is just a good thing.
Yeah.
So long as it's consistent information. And I think that even if we wanted to print something, if you had something like that, it would probably have a way to translate into a printable version that we could share without having to do a lot of double work. So nice job on finding both free and ease of use.
Yeah, that's not easy.
I do know. Well, not to have a good one, right? Like it's easy to find free. It's not easy to find really good free.
Right.
So
so and then also as part of that, we could do, with the Facebook and things like that, you can link to it and stuff like that. So yeah, and we can also link back to the SAU page, we can link back to our agendas and our minutes and things like that. But not everybody, sorry, Adam, the SAU page is not super user friendly to find things. And, so I think it's also a little intimidating to find deep information. And then not everybody has Facebook. So many people don't have Facebook. So, yeah. And then, so yeah, I'm also wondering if there's a way for those that aren't on Facebook and aren't on Twitter, I need to see if there's a way to kind of run a feed into the website. I think we can run a feed into the website. So everything Adam posts would feed to this as well, so that Joe Schmo doesn't have Facebook, but they can still see they can still see the SAU Facebook feed, as well as if we end up with our own, we could maybe do our own. I'm not making promises on that, but I'm making promises to look. So, and then my only other thought, not having to do with the website, but some of the stuff Josh listed, I have a problem with using the principal's emails, weekly or monthly emails for our stuff. The only thing I think personally I would feel comfortable doing is asking them to include our meeting dates and times. Other than that, I feel like it belongs to the building principals, and we have our own way to do it. And we shouldn't be taking the real estate. So that's my thought on that. I think asking them to do the, asking them to include our upcoming meetings is fine, but I think doing too much else isn't the right thing for us to do. I can't say it's against RSA or ethical or anything like that, but it's just my gut instinct.
Okay. Anybody else with anything? Okay. So it sounds like from here, Beth, as my first action, I certainly give you permission to go explore the webpage idea, and then you can hand it back or hand it over when the time is right. And Ellen and I can meet at the pool this Wednesday. It'll be 60, so we'll dip our toes in, and that'll be good. And we can get this ball rolling, and hopefully come back in April with, not as lengthy as a presentation, but maybe some ideas of where we're headed and how to move forward, if that sounds reasonable. So. There we go.
Yeah, and Beth, I do my own website, and although I crashed it 3 times the first year, it's now been 11 years. I've learned a lot, so I could probably help get some stuff up there.
Yeah. What I found, Netlify actually has the ability to grant access to email addresses. So once you have the overarching owner of it, which would be some communication.asb@sau39.org or something like that, that owner can then give access to Josh and Ellen. And then when Ellen moves on, she can, the kid remove access from Ellen and grant it to the next person. So that was one thing that I was really excited about to find. So it would give the ability to others really easily to go in and, add the content and stuff like that. But as I'm building this out, if anybody wants to send an email to Josh and or Ellen to tell them what I should put in it, what I should open up areas for, let me know. And I can work on getting that done. But I can build out some stuff and add all of our old LTEs, because I have all of those, and at least get some other stuff. But I need ideas on what else to add that we want to communicate as well. So, okay. Moving on, we are running a little bit behind, but I think that was a good conversation. Consent agenda. Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda for the evening? Terry, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Ellen, any discussion?
Yeah, as far as, so the school start time thing, I know that we have to ratify that at our individual committee meetings. Is the memo that's in the consent agenda ratifying that, or we have further discussion on this? Are we taking, are we taking another vote on it, or is this going to be part of the vote? I would prefer that it be a separate vote, but if it's part of that vote, then that's it. But I would think that it would be part of a separate discussion if we had any more feedback on that.
This technically is it. Approving this as part of the consent agenda is that. We can pull that one topic from the consent agenda to have a deeper discussion on, if you'd like to do that.
Well, I would like to do that because I don't have a problem with a lot of the rest of the consent agenda, but I do not agree with everything the way that it's been proposed, and I would still hope that I would want to ask if we have more information on some of the things we talked about at our SAU meeting regarding buses and such, if we have any more information on that before we hold that vote.
Okay, so let's, Terry, are you willing to amend your motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 8 and 9? 8 and 10.
Yes,
Okay.
I am motioning that we do the other items that are not under discussion.
Okay. And Ellen, you're okay seconding that still? Okay.
Mhm.
So any further discussion on 1 through 8 and 10? Josh.
Yep, just a couple quick questions. One around how our generator or lack of generator works at the buildings, whether our buildings are protected from catastrophic failure by some sort of minimal generator system, or if we have a situation like we did a couple weeks ago that lasted longer and was colder, would our buildings be in danger of freezing pipes and other problems?
Roger, did you have an answer? I believe that was a prior question. Do you have an answer to that about what our generators work? We have generators, correct?
We have generator at AMS. We have a 50 kW generator there. It feeds partial loads throughout the buildings. HVAC equipment, lighting, plug loads, the boilers, life safety equipment, indoor, outdoor lighting, block heater for the generator, clock systems, kitchen equipment, just various selective loads throughout AMS. Clark and Wilkins do not have a generator, and the SAU, as we all know, does not have a generator either. So ideally, yes, if the outage had gone on longer, Clark, Wilkins, and the SAU potentially would have seen some catastrophic failures with freeze-ups.
Okay.
I will say that we were lucky is the portables did freeze up, but we were able to get power back on in time, and there's heat tape underneath the portables for the feed that comes from the main building. And just a little time of that running, the portables actually, they thawed out, and we were lucky with that one.
Okay. Thank you. Does that
answers the question? I guess that begs the question, should we as a board at some point consider what the cost would be to have generators for these buildings, whether one is transferable to the other and we can rotate, if that makes sense. But anyway, and that doesn't have to be answered tonight, but just a discussion to think about. We obviously live where we live, so we should generally probably be prepared for snow in the future and power outages in the future as well. So that's it for that question, though.
Okay. Thank you. Terry?
First, I would like to acknowledge we have some unanticipated revenue, and thank you, Energy North. It looks like somebody helped sign us up for a grant from them. So we have $500 toward, make sure I say it right, math and science programs, which seems like a very appropriate place to spend that. And then we also have some funds in memory of Donovan. and from his extended family members to our band program at Amherst Middle School. And I think that that's a really lovely way to honor his memory. And I know that we will most likely be hearing more from our PTA and finding a more long-term way to remember him. But I thought that was a really lovely thing to come from his family. And are we going to talk about principal reports separately, or should I ask any question now?
You can ask a question now.
Okay, so first off, super sad that I'm not in the school right now during Kindness Weeks, one of my favorite weeks over at AMS. And I am so happy to see it went on as it normally does in a really wonderful, positive way. And thank you for the extra picture since I can't be there to see it. So thank you. And so the mascot changing is still an eagle. It just looks different. What's going on with that? That was news to me.
So earlier this year, we worked with a graphic designer to look for updating our mascot a little bit. We haven't really redone our logo in a really long time. So looking for something to just update our letterhead and get out some new apparel. So there were a number of different logos that were put forward, and students and staff all got to vote on a whole bunch of different ones. I think there were like 6 or 7.
Okay.
And that was the one that got the most votes. So that has been put out on some new apparel and just refreshing that for kids. It's been really fun to see so many of the new sweatshirts and t-shirts and things like that around the building. So it's been a great addition.
Oh, that's really cool. So that's what I assumed had happened, but it's neat to hear some of the backup process. And I would say for both of you, thank you for really highlighting what you're doing to make remote students feel a part of things, because I think it's such an essential part of this year. And I know that it's a little different, obviously, for your age groups and for your schools, but I really appreciate having that highlighted and seeing the lengths you're going to really make sure that every student feels like they are as equal as possible part of the school community. So thank you for those efforts. And again, more pictures of kids doing kiddie things. You just don't know how much it helps. And I feel like I had one more thing that I had a question of for elementary, and I'm trying to get back to that one.
The intervention, the after school intervention by chance, Terry?
I have a feeling that was probably it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I'm like madly scrolling back up. Yeah, I know that this has definitely been a concern for many families. Is, you know, it's been a crazy year, and what if my child does need a little extra help keeping up and catching up? And so, if maybe we can speak a little bit to that for those who aren't familiar with the plans for intervention after school.
Sure. So we actually start tomorrow, Tuesday, Thursdays for 4 weeks. We sent out 81 invitations, and currently we have almost 80% of the parents that have agreed to the 4 weeks. After that point in time, we're doing reading this time. After that point in time, we'll take a look at math. We're providing teacher-led interventions per pod. So we're really excited about that opportunity, about the number of teachers that are participating, and the opportunity really to provide some quality interventions to that population of students.
Thank you. Okay. Before I call on Josh again, does anybody have anything else? Okay, go ahead, Josh.
So it doesn't necessarily, again, have to be tonight if it's not ready, but one thing I noticed was the air quality report, and specifically some numbers at AMS that seemed less than ideal. So I don't know if Roger's prepared to speak on that yet, or if it's maybe next month, let's take a look at it kind of situation.
I can speak to that if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So actually, I'm really excited to be a part of a district that proactively does air quality testing 4 times a year. That's very, very uncommon in a school. And it's just, I'm happy to be a part of it. It provides great information for us. So we did air quality on the 1st of February, and we do have some numbers that are a little bit higher at AMS, but I attributed them to, we do have a lot of just hand sanitizer throughout the building. Because when I got these reports back, Josh, I followed up with the vendor as well. And AMS, we have a lot of hand sanitizer throughout the building. And we also have some mechanical equipment that needs to be repaired there as well. A lot of the mechanical equipment we actually were able to repair during February vacation, and we're also planning for a bunch of repairs for April vacation as well. One thing that I haven't done at this time is you guys have a bunch of data that's on the district website going all the way back to, it looks as if September of 2017. I actually like combining all of those air quality reports and actually showing us where the fluctuations are, the different times of year, to really pull all of that data together rather than trying to go to December's report, then fall back to another December report from a different year. So I still want to do that. That's just going to provide a lot of good data for us and actually see our improvements as we go, and also see those areas that still need improvement as well. So that's a work in progress for us, and they always will be, Josh, as far as just reviewing those reports and making sure our equipment and our buildings are safe for our students and staff.
Perfect. Thank you, Roger.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. So my points I want to point out, Terry, thank you for bringing up the unanticipated revenue from Donovan's family. That was on my list. So I definitely wanted to highlight that and thank them. I think that was a really great way to honor him. Additionally, the fund balance report that we have, it is number 7. We'll be going over the fund balance in more detail in April. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. We'll be going over the fund balance then, as well as having a deeper discussion about what we want to do with the fund balance, going into more detail about COVID funds versus non-COVID funds, what our abilities are for each, as well as looking at the budget and how it pertains, because we will, this is a weird year where we actually, we haven't voted yet, and we're going to actually have our some final numbers and things like that. So we wanted to definitely touch back on that in April. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware we were going to be coming back to all of that then. Adam.
Thank you. Well, I figured while you were speaking of it, would be a good time for me to raise this issue. So our kindergarten registration numbers are higher than anticipated. And we are going to be suggesting that in April, the board have a further discussion about staffing. And along those same lines, in this very unique year where our budget process has been delayed and we have the chance to revisit our budget, it might be necessary actually to do that as it relates to kindergarten. We're waiting for our health trust rates to come back for next year, which might allow for some savings that might help things wash out. But for right now, we have 121 students that are on the census and 12 students who last fall were either homeschooling or repeating preschool will be enrolling in K this year, in addition to 15 students who weren't on the census who have already registered in the first week of registration, which means right now, if everything plays out, which is too early to know for sure, we're looking at 148 kindergarten students, whereas we only projected around 139. So if that's the case, we might need to have a further discussion in April. As you'll remember, our staffing in Amherst is already very tight, and we were already having discussions last fall about the absolute most important, highest priority places to put additional staff. So we don't have additional staff kicking around to move into kindergarten. And if these numbers play out in April, I'm going to be suggesting the board relooks at the budget. So just a heads up and a forewarning about that.
And you're going to come with some ideas of where that might come from.
Of course we will. We'll have a plan.
All right. So yeah, so I just so keep that on your radar for April. Thank you, Adam, for bringing that up. And since it was just mentioned, any parents of kindergartners or 5-year-olds, if you plan on registering them, please do so we can have an accurate count. And if you if you plan on holding off on a year, you can also notify the schools so that we know not to count on you too. I know that's come up recently, so just wanted to plug that real quick. All right, so final vote. Let's roll call vote on the consent agenda. Tom?
Gothier, yes.
Ellen?
Grugin, yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Josh?
Conklin, yes.
And Kuzma, yes. Okay, so item number 9, the start times. There was some things that came up in our discussion at the SAU meeting about this that I do know that we actually have some information sort of on. One is the bus company is already looking at the bus routes for all grades, but especially elementary. It takes a while for them to redo that. But they're working on it, and they are, working very hard on reducing that turnaround time. As Adam mentioned, he gave a very long, time in the morning for buses on purpose because he didn't want to, under promise, I think might be the way to say it. He didn't want to say we could do it faster than we really could. The bus company is working on that. So they'll get that back to us. Additionally, we did have Michelle worked on some numbers for busing. A lot of questions have been asked of why can't we just have everybody start at the same time? How much does that really cost? We did have, we got some numbers on that. Right now, we share busing. So there are 17 buses. We share busing. Amherst pays 64% of all of the buses because of how that works out and how we share it. If we were to double up on busing, so elementary would have its own routes, we would have, or its own buses, we would pay 100% of 14 buses. So we would be paying the 64% of the Sauhegan and AMS buses, and we'd be paying, and then we would be also paying 100% of the elementary routes. And Michelle, correct me if I misread this, we would be paying an extra over what we already pay, which is well over $600,000 right now. We would be paying an extra $800,000 if we doubled up on busing. We're not talking a few $100,000, like $800,000 if everybody started too close to each other, that we had to double up on busing. So just so everybody was aware on that.
And there's a shortage of drivers as there is. So that's
not even taking into consideration whether we could get the bus drivers and the buses themselves. So right. Yeah, $800,000 a year on buses. If not, it actually might be, I think I rounded it down. I think it's actually higher than 800,000 by, $10 or so thousand. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. I probably should have brought it to the table first, but can I have a motion to accept the start times so we can discuss this? Sorry. Terry, can I have a second? Josh. All right. Any further discussion other than what I already mentioned? Tom.
Yeah, so the bus route has me concerned because we don't have a definitive plan yet. I understand that takes time, but as of right now, we were talking about 6:30 as the early start time for elementary school buses, an hour and 15 minutes before school starts at 7:45. So we can wish and want and do all of that stuff and expect that it will change. And I'm confident that we'll have something that's better than 6:30. There's no guarantee of that. So asking 6 and 7-year-olds to get up and be ready to go out the door at 6:30, I think is a bit extreme without knowing exactly what that plan is going to be. But we've touched on that. My next question is, what have we done to look at affordable options as well as variable options for childcare after school for elementary students? We had comments at the last meeting that this plan can't cost the school district more money, which I'm totally fine with and I agree with, but I don't know that it's fair to force parents to pay more money, especially on such a short notice here in the next couple of months. I don't know that that's really the best option either. So what do we have for aftercare options, especially affordable options? knowing that not everybody has, not everybody is going to only have 1 or 2 years until their high school student can take care of those kids. That may not be the case as to how it works out. So what are the options that we're going to have for after school care for elementary students until high school students get home?
Anna.
So Michelle, myself, and Kim Sarfty, we met the other day to start looking into options. Obviously, we have new mornings after school, the Boys and Girls Club, Nashua YMCA has reached out. So those are 3 options. I know that Adam had mentioned too with the opportunity with the school ending earlier, opportunities for after school clubs. But that would be more, I would say, like opportunities. It might be like a 4-week club that was going on, but the other 3 are ready, willing, and able to provide assistance.
And I realize now I didn't word my question the way that I intended to. So if you have an older student that is in middle school or in high school that can take care of the younger student the way that they do now, what are we doing for those families next year when we're saying you're losing your childcare and now you have to pay for childcare? I don't know if that's a great option for them. And until their high school kid gets home, what are the options? Do they not have any choice to be able, other than to send their kid to new morning or have their elementary school kid go home by themselves for upwards of an hour after school until, or probably even longer than that, probably upwards of an hour and a half until their older sibling gets home? That's a big hole in this plan as well, where as much as we may or may not want to accept it and face it, some families are forced to have their older siblings take care of their younger siblings because of single parent households or because of 2 working parent households. And I think that just completely obliterates that. And now we're forcing these families, no matter their economic situation, to pay for coverage unless we have some other intermediary plan. I'm not sure I worded it better that time, but I hope so. Okay. Those are the 2 things that I had right off the bat.
Okay. Ellen?
I guess my only hang up was really trying to get an update on the middle school being dismissed at 3. I did want to comment, there was a lot of feedback that the high schoolers who want to take advantage of a club will need that window of time so they can jump on the bus. And I'm going to chime in as the only one on the board who has kids who graduated from Sauhegan High School. Oh my God, that's unbelievable. Yeah, okay, that's me. They had to get a ride home. They went to clubs or they went to sports. There was no bus to jump on after a half an hour of a club meeting. So that seems like a new concept to me. And I think that if we can get at least the middle schoolers home or the kids who can't or don't do clubs out at 3 and everybody on buses at 3:15, if we can do it with the time window, it seems like the feedback from the community, that would be very positive. So I know there was discussion about it, and I trust the administration will get there because of the strong discussion around it. That was my only hang up. I will comment to what Tom said. I think you either support a time change or you don't, because regardless, this is going to affect somebody either in the morning or the end of the day in terms of childcare. So, whether again, we're a district that can't do this with kids all getting out at the same time. We can't do that. It's not affordable. So we have to either support the idea that the older kids get to go in later at 8:30, or you don't. I mean, that's the end of the story. You can't nitpick what time now the elementary kids are going to get out and how that's going to affect somebody. You're just going to go back and forth banging your head against a wall. So either support it or you don't. I also trust the administration will do everything they can to support working parents, like they do now. But I would really love to get a survey done of working parents. I mean, we have this conversation a lot. I would love to know how many rely on their middle schooler or high schooler getting home first to watch their elementary siblings. I would love to get a number. So if we could, I'm happy to work on that. Adam, you and I loosely talked about me kind of having a group and getting some feedback. But it's, you know, it's this thing that's constantly talked about. Then I'm thinking, well, how many high schoolers have elementary siblings? Like, you know, that's a pretty big span. There certainly could be babysitters for hire, that's different, but how many families rely on a sibling taking care of a sibling? And is that as big as an issue as we think it is? So that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you. Terry?
So I want to echo a little bit what Tom was saying, that I think that it's not incumbent upon us to have some place for kids to go until like 6 or 6:30 at night. That's not the school district's responsibility, absolutely not. And parents already, if they know that they have to work until late, they've already kind of figured out. And it's great to have some additional things to offer them that might be picking up at school, and that would be awesome to have. The YMCA, you know, has not in the past been somebody who's picked up directly. So if we can work out some of those relationships, that's going to be helpful. But I think that what we are responsible for, or should be, is that kind of window until high school safely gets out. We have teachers that are affected by that at the middle and high school. We have some older siblings that could come pick up their younger siblings. And so I don't think it's certainly as large of a group that we're talking about, but it's a very important group that we do owe them that. We owe them something, whether it's keeping a para over for, you know, a window, or having subsidize something. But I think that it's on us to make that workable. And same thing in the morning. It's never been a real problem at AMS, because when it starts right now, you know, you can take a bus or you can drop your kid on the way. But we have 5th graders, and 5th graders, parents are going to feel less comfortable putting them, just making sure that they got themselves on a bus. Or we need a way to, it doesn't have to be a very formal program, but it could be very similar to what Bedford at least used to do. I don't know if they're still doing it, where for like $50 a year or some really nominal amount, they just came, they were in the cafeteria, they had breakfast, they were safely inside the building. At a, you know, at an earlier hour, their parents could drop them, and then they stayed there until school started. So I think that, again, we don't need to open it up for everyone. 8th graders can very well get themselves on a bus, but 5th graders, I think, is a different situation. So I think we can be targeted in what we provide, but I do think that the onus is on us to provide something. And again, I have lots of thoughts on this. I've been working on it a long time. I'm happy to be part of any kind of helping work that needs to happen in this regard. But I do think that it's our responsibility, in my opinion.
Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that, you know, morning time AMS is being looked at as well as part of this, and is in the process of. Yep. So, okay. Any further comments regarding start time? Okay. So the motion is on the table. Roll call. Ellen?
Grugin, yes.
Tom?
Gothier, no.
Terry?
Beam, yes.
Josh?
Conklin, yes.
And Kuzma, yes. Okay. Moving on to the last public comment of the evening. If any member of the public would like to raise their hands, please do so using the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Gonna give it just a minute. I see a hand raised. Miss Gibson, you may unmute yourself.
I just wanted to thank the board for all of its discussion over the start times. I believe that it might be detrimental to change the start times to the new program. And the reason why is basically for all the parents that have to reconfigure their babysitting, daycare, childcare options. I do believe that maybe the PTA could help with some ideas, as well as maybe offering those families who economically need it to give them some financial assistance. So I think there are more options out there than we have actually covered tonight, but that was a good start.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to make a statement, public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. We do have a non-public for this evening. Can I have a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A3, Roman numeral 2, letters A, C, anything else, Adam? Okay, A and C. Josh, you're making that motion?
Yep.
Okay, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Tom, roll call. Ellen?
Grugin, yes.
Tom?
Gothier, yes.
Terry?
Beam, yes.
Josh?
Conklin, yes.
And Kuzma, yes. So we are going into non-public.
Give me just a second here.